based. So I'm trying to work on systems thinking and undergraduate sustainability education. So let's see. So, today I'll just talk about my OER textbook project on systems thinking for sustainability and why I'm doing it. I don't think I'll have a chance to show my class exercise. So I'm just going to focus on that today. And
Marcella, what is ORE?
Okay. So, okay.
OER.
Thought everyone knew. Okay. So it's open educational resources. So it's like stuff that's Creative Commons. Right. And so this, like the focus of what I'm trying to do is Creative Commons share alike. That would be non-commercial. It'd be for education use. So that it's just like you wouldn't have to pay for it. It would be out there and available. And I'll explain why OER in a minute, but just some background about me. I have an interdisciplinary PhD from Vanderbilt in environmental management, which isn't very common to have interdisciplinary PhD, but they offered it at Vanderbilt. And it kind of like means that I have knowledge about a lot of different areas, but I'm not super masterful in any one area. Like I'm not, a lot of PhDs are really, really focused. This is more looking at things from a 10,000 foot view from a lot of different perspectives. So when I got done with my PhD, I worked in corporate programs and as a consultant to Fortune 500 companies, helping them with their sustainability programs. So a lot of my background is practitioner based. And then I just recently came to teaching, kind of fell into it, and wasn't sure I'd like it, and I have. So I've actually been at my school, Roger Williams University, which is a small liberal arts college, for about 6 years. So that's some about me. So just a little bit about Roger Williams. Doesn't look like this right now, but we do get snow in the winter. It's small liberal arts college. So we have 14-week semesters. So we don't do quarters or anything. They're just like 2 semesters in summer school, and there are some winter sessions. What I love about it is that the classes are small. It's like 25 students per class. We're not a big school. I think there's about total like 5,000 students. So my cat is here throwing up a hairball. Sorry for that background noise. But so I teach in the sustainability studies minor program, and I teach what I'm going to be focusing on today is about the Cest 101 Introduction to Sustainability Studies course that I teach. And just to give you a sense of it, it's a survey course. So we go through a lot of information in a short amount of time at a high level, just to introduce them to a range of sustainability topics. And there's a range of majors that take it: business, architecture, marine biology, engineering, construction management. So the diversity of majors that come in is quite broad. And so this can make it a challenge, but it can also make it really interesting. This is just a little bit about this program. So if you're not familiar with sustainability studies, what it is this is what's on the website, the program website. It's a definition. So essentially what they're saying is that what we do is we look at pressing problems like climate change and biodiversity loss. And we look at it from not just the science perspective, but humanities, business, engineering, like from a variety of disciplines. So that students can better understand like what the relationship between environmental, social, and economic issues. So a lot of people come into my class, they think it's going to be an environmental studies or environmental science class, and it's not, and they're surprised at the amount of social science. And we also talk about some basic economic issues too. So it's about looking at all of that together and how it shapes how we affect the environment, and how it shapes like things like climate change and biodiversity loss. So our minor program, we have 3 core courses, and that's usually where I teach. Sometimes I teach extra courses, like some elective courses, but it's usually 3 core. And Sustainability 101, which is what I'm going to talk about today, which the textbook is geared towards. And then we have 301, which tends to be more tools for analysis. And then they do a capstone project in the community on sustainability. That's the 401 course. And then in the meantime, they take other electives from other departments. And so that's the way it's currently structured. Okay, let me know if I'm going
Quick
too fast.
question on the 301 class. Like what tools are taught and what topic? Like, do you include economics and other metrics?
So we actually need to do a review because it's been 10 years, and I think we need to, and I think we're going to talk about how to rescaffold, or like if we need to change the scaffolding. So in 301, we cover like life cycle analysis, life cycle assessment. We do life cycle cost analysis. So, you know, a lot of times sustainable technology has a high upfront cost, but can save in the long run. So how do you show that to somebody? And then it's a lot of talking about climate change again to help cement their understanding, and then like looking at carbon footprints and stuff like that. So that's right now what it contains. There's not systems, I don't include systems dynamics in that course. It hasn't traditionally been included. And where I normally talk about systems thinking is in the 101, and I'm trying to get it in more courses. And yeah, and I can explain why it's that way in a second. Does that help understand, or?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I started 6 years ago, I was looking for a textbook, and I found it extremely hard, like to find a textbook. People have different ideas of what sustainability means. Generally, there's considered to have like 3 pillars. So they tend to have an environmental section, like some basics on environmental science and environmental issues. They might have some economic sections and some social, a section on social and ethics issues. One of the challenges I found with the textbooks is that they tend to be really compartmentalized. They don't talk about how it interacts. I'm sorry, my cat's being a total brat right now. So they tend to just be written in more siloed sections. And then there are some exercises asking people to, like, students to evaluate them from different perspectives, but I don't feel like it does a good job of teaching them how to tie those issues together to see like the whole picture. So I haven't been satisfied with the undergraduate textbooks that are out there. So I mostly create my own material right now. And another thing that I think is lacking is it doesn't help students understand feedback and systems and tipping points, which can be, if they don't understand this, it can be hard for them to understand why we're saying that we need to take action on climate change now. There's, I think, which I think this is an important point to educate students about. And I think we saw that too with COVID. A lot of people didn't understand the exponential growth of COVID. And I saw on TV, Department of Health officials like saying that they're having a hard time communicating those exponential growth patterns and the importance of taking action early to avoid that. There is some systems material for sustainability education out there. This is Integrate site. I don't know if you're familiar with, is anyone familiar with what they're doing? This is at Carleton University. And they got some funding and they have some good case studies and stuff. And I do like it, but it's very geosciences. Like, it says that it's a great fit for these courses, but its focus is on the hard science, and the social science is often not integrated very much into it, if at all. But they have some really good material, but it tends to be more technical in nature. Okay, so why a systems thinking lens for sustainability? So I'll give you some observations I've had from teaching the last 6 years. So from my perspective, I guess I'm trying to create a textbook that teaches sustainability from a systems thinking lens and not from a compartmentalized lens, and also teaches some basic systems thinking tools to help them see connections. And I'll explain why. So do you guys know the metaphor of the cat and the clock? Sometimes it's like cat and the cloud. You don't know that? Oh, okay. Because yeah, so a lot of people I know that do systems work are familiar with it. So I try to explain to students that sustainability problems are complex systems problems. They're more like a cat than a clock. So, they're not machine-like. And what I notice is that students tend to treat sustainability problems more machine-like, right? Which I like the source Mark Fodden. He has a podcast on systems. And so he talks about, this is the complicated problem, this is the complex adaptive system problem. And so like a clock, right, it acts in a predetermined and constrained way. They don't have much scope for deviation, right? If you know the parts, you know how they work together. You got the blueprint, you can figure out what's going on, and there's not much scope for deviation. So this is like a complicated problem, a clock-like problem, or simple or complicated, and it's easy to predict and diagnose problems in this kind of system if something's not working, right? Maybe need a new battery or something like that, but you can figure it out based on the blueprint. You can have an expert, or if it's not too complicated, someone can figure it out based on the blueprint how to fix it. Okay, so sustainability problems are more complex adaptive system problems like climate change and biodiversity loss. And so this is Smokey. Actually, he's the one who's been jumping around just now and here. So this is what I call it, the complex adaptive system problems, right? There's lots of interaction between the various cat parts and interactions with its environment. So this is Smokey. He's constantly evolving. He's dynamic. He's learning. And then when he learns, he adapts and changes. And he's, and just it's constantly evolving, right? He's not acting in a constrained way. There's not a blueprint to figure out how to deal with Smokey, like just like a kid, right? Kids grow and evolve and they adapt to their environment, and what worked at one point in time won't work in another point in time later. Like if you try to, at 5 years old, try to get a kid to try to clean up their room, that might not work at 15 because they evolve and adapt and change to their circumstances. And so this is a more harder to diagnose problem where you can have unintended consequences. And so one of the things I noticed is that students tend to treat sustainability problems more like a clock-like problem. Like, we'll find the solution and then the solution will change, fix the system. But these problems are dynamic. A lot of the parts are adapting and changing. And so it's usually not that simple. And this is where I find systems thinking can help them make this distinction and help them see that it requires a different kind of problem solving approach. Okay. Any questions? Did I lose anyone, or am I making sense? Feedback?
Yeah, one thing I would add is for the cat or the child example, right? You see certain behaviors, and if you don't like, then you have to try to fix that behavior by, introducing a new approach, or you have to try to figure out like what leads to that behavior, and so you constantly change the way you react so that the cat's behavior or the child's behavior would meet some sort of your expectation. But sometimes, yeah, it's a learning process and it's dynamic on its own too.
Yeah, that's actually excellent point, because yeah, it is. It's a learning. It's learning. It's not like fix the battery, right, and it's fixed. Like with a clock that might need a battery, you have to constantly learn, test, review, try again with complex systems. That's a really good point. Yeah, I should add that. Okay. So,
I, I have a couple of comments.
okay, yeah.
I like the fact that you're working on a book and that you've looked at a lot of sustainability, potential sustainability textbooks, and it might be worth writing some of that up in a article or a multiple book review type thing,
Yeah.
because I think other people, I have a book on my shelf called Sustainability Science, and I guess there's a number of those available. I remember when I looked this one up, I was overwhelmed with how many books cover that subject. This one happens to use system dynamics, and I happen to have a copy because the guy who wrote it used an example of mine in one of the chapters, so he gave me a copy of the book. But it's, I wouldn't say it was a great book, but it does use system dynamics as a sort of a tool throughout the textbook. I can tell you that it's, well, it's right here. I don't look at it very often, but it's called, it's just by Bert J.M. DeVries. I don't know if you can see that.
Sustainability science degrees. Okay, I'll take a look.
Yeah. And it uses a lot of systems type stuff. I have not looked at it carefully. I just happen to have it. So that was one thing. I wondered if you have looked at the Open University in the UK.
Oh, they've got wonderful stuff. I actually took courses through Open University in UK. And yes, I really like their stuff. So, but yeah, in terms of, I think their examples, if I recall from the classes, were a lot on public health in the UK. But yeah, I have looked at it. And
But they do use, they have systems related things.
Yeah, they have 2 courses. I didn't see any textbooks on sustainability, but they do have courses on systems thinking and complex systems and systems for beginners. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I ask about that is I just joined recently the International Society for System Sciences. And they've been around a long time, and I think they're even less focused than the System Dynamics Society in that they have a lot of special interest groups that cover every possible thing, but they have a discussion every Wednesday and Saturday. I think they repeat the discussion, and you can sit in on it if you're a member. Membership isn't very expensive, I don't think. Anyway, I found it very interesting. They're mostly the ones who go to that discussion thing are about my age, but they're older people who, have time to sit around and chat with people on the other side of the world. Anyway, I found that sort of useful and interesting that people, they have different perspectives on what systems are. My earpods keep falling out. The other thing I was going to ask about is you're referring to systems thinking, and I always wonder what that means. I mean, I have my own idea what it means, but in your courses and in your thinking, do you link that to some sort of systems modeling, or are you happy with ending at the systems thinking part?
I do, yeah, I do include tools like causal modeling. We do model. So I look at that as a tool, and then like systems thinking as like first get them involved in thinking about, not looking at things in a linear way, but kind of teach them a different form of thinking. And I can go into that. I have some examples.
Okay.
So this is another just experience from class. Like I talked about, a lot of the students coming in, I run this experiment in class, and I ask them this question. Again, inevitably only like one person will get it right. And again, this is my concern is the lack of understanding of feedback and processes, particularly with climate change, like the lack of exponential growth patterns. So I'm sure you guys could answer this, or do you want to give it a shot? Like the lily pod.
Let's see.
This is a comment.
Totally covered by at least in 30 days. So the 12 days or no, the 12 days.
Close.
Oh, 30 days, 30, so 29.
29, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, actually it's, yeah, day 29. Yes. I'm sorry. Yes. Most students will say 15. So yeah, I guess my brain's not working today. Okay. So a lot of them will say day 15, but it's day 29, right? Because it doubles. And so, so when I run this, right, so this is a typical growth pattern. Here's a lily pad growth pattern. And this is like, typically, if you're going to say day 15, this is kind of like a thinking of the pattern. And if you recognize that it's an exponential growth pattern, then you'll see that all of a sudden it doesn't seem bad, it doesn't seem bad. And then all of a sudden, boom, it explodes. And so this is another thing, like I find that it's really important to educate students on, because they tend to think in linear cause and effect, big cause, big effect, and not in exponential patterns. And so like with climate change, like, right, it's following more exponential growth pattern than it is this kind of pattern. And so like why things might not seem that bad, it's hard for them to understand why I got to take action early, because all of a sudden things can quickly get out of control. Like, and we saw this with COVID, where it looks fine. Why do we have to wear a mask? Why do we have to wear a mask? And then boom, like the cases exploded. And right, so this is important. Like, so this is a function of reinforcing feedback. And so I think, like, I noticed that a lot of them aren't habituated to thinking about that in that way. So this is another thing I find that systems thinking is really good for, to help them think about things in exponential patterns. And then also about mental models. So this is one of the tools, Richard, you were asking. So this is a systems thinking tool. I think it comes from MIT systems, the Sengi and that group over there that does more of the business modeling. And I find this a really helpful tool to get them to think about systems problem at a deeper level. Are you guys familiar with the Iceberg model? Do you want me to walk through it, Ruby?
Yeah, you can talk about it.
Okay, so I like this because it seems conceptually easy for the students. This is one of the tools I use along with causal modeling. But what I think students often miss is thinking about their mental models, like thinking about their thinking on what's causing these underlying structures that's relating these patterns. And so mental models would be your beliefs, assumptions, or values. And those are like societal, like dominant paradigms are the ones that create the structures in society. Like our economic structures, there's beliefs behind those that created those laws and those structures. And those structures create the patterns we see and the events that happen. And just to give you a sense, and I find this helpful to kind of work through this when we're talking about different kinds of systems, to first start with what are the mental models involved, and then map them to the structures in society, and then map what patterns are they creating, and then how are they creating events we're seeing, that the events we want and don't want. And so we kind of use it as a flow diagram. And just to, this is one example I use in class. So what's your first impression when you see something like this? Of the okay, so any first impressions of this house?
Is that the drought and not watering the lawn?
Are you on the West Coast?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Drought, yeah. How does your impression differ when you look at this? What's your first impression of this?
Well, it depends on your perspective, right? If you're a landscaper, then you want something nice and green. But if you're an environmentalist, then you say, oh, that's, a lot of land could be used for growing veggies or something else, but now it's just for landscaping, which, doesn't provide the same ecosystem services. I guess it depends on what you think, where you.
Absolutely. Like everyone has different mental models, and it's funny because like we're here in the East Coast where we have a lot of rain. And so usually like here, I get the students like this, the first impression is they don't take care of their house. They don't care about it. And that this person cares about their house. because we talk a lot about lawns and how it doesn't increase biodiversity and why do we have them. There's actually very fascinating history of the reason why we have lawns, but I don't have time to go into it, but right. So this is, most people like, when I pull my students here, you're right, in the West Coast, they might think drought and have different reasons. But when I poll my students, most of them think, well, they don't care about, the house must not be in good shape. I wouldn't want to buy this house. I'd rather buy this house with the green lawn. Like, we have these unconscious mental models or beliefs. And this leads to structures, right? So now we have this whole industry to help keep lawns green, right? It creates this structure that creates this pattern where we're getting more nitrogen or in water, especially here in Rhode Island, like we're on the ocean. And so like sometimes you'll see those mansions by the water, they have this green lawn, and then they've got algae out front, which probably from the runoff of their fertilizer and stuff. So I find this is a helpful tool to explore, like, well, what's going on here? Like, what are our beliefs and values that are creating these structures? And talk about, okay, so if we changed our mental model, if we thought wildflowers was better, we would change this structure. Okay, does that make sense? Like, so, so mental models lead to structures that lead to patterns. And so we spend a lot of time exploring what are the underlying beliefs, like, because a lot of times it's on the unconscious level and we need to bring it forward to try to understand, where do these beliefs come from? Do they still make sense today? Given a lot of like our economic system was developed, around industrialization, does it still make sense? The world was a lot emptier. It was a lot different world. So kind of helping us go deep. And then the idea behind the using an iceberg tool is that often, if you can change mental models, like if you just change, people don't think they need a green lawn. They think wildflowers are fun, fine, then, right, it just automatically, the structures and patterns will change. If you just change the structure and not the underlying mental model, you're not going to get as much benefit. And so you get some changes in patterns, but people who still hold this mental model will maybe still use those products, even if you don't want them to. And there was a really great example from dueling that behavioral economist in the EU did, which showed that, so I guess they tried to outlaw dueling hundreds of years ago. It took like 140 years to outlaw dueling, to get the people to stop dueling. And so they passed the law, which in this system's thinking terms, a law would be a structure. So they passed the law saying no dueling because they were losing too many officers to dueling. And so that wasn't good, good for them, for the rulers. And so, but it was so ingrained as a mental model that people went around the law and did it anyway. And so like we often see, if the mental models are not aligned with the law, it can lead to black markets and other things. And so I always tell my students it's really important to evaluate this in any system to see what's going on, because you can get unintended consequences if you try to change the structure and you don't take into account the mental model. Anyway, so why systems thinking for sustainability studies? Again, I find that this is really, really true. This was from Sturman in 1994. And again, he's more from the business school at MIT, like on the business side, organizational dynamics. And he found, and I found this true, is that people often stop at a single cause and stop searching for additional explanations. And often well-intentioned efforts to solve problems, like the way we solve problems today, become tomorrow's problems. So I often find that true with my students. They think they have the answer and then they stop and they don't ask themselves, okay, so what kind of unintended consequences could this happen? Could there be delays in the system and all these other questions? So the reason, after having taught this a couple of years and observing all this, is that I think students, and a lot of times think in linear reductionist terms. And systems thinking, I found when I started incorporating systems thinking and systems tools into the course, I felt like it helped students wade through the complexity of an issue. I felt like they got a more holistic understanding. They could see the interrelationships. They better understood feedback in a system and what effect it could have. And this to me is really, really important because, right, so something that might seem insignificant early on can quickly go from bad to worse. And we saw that with COVID, and the concern with climate change is that. So, so this is why I think systems thinking needs to be incorporated in sustainability studies, plus the United Nations identified it as a key competency to deal with global sustainability challenges in the future. So they've also found it. This is I guess how I came to systems thinking, integrating systems thinking into sustainability studies. So how do I teach it? I introduce system thinking concepts like mental models and icebergs and causal models early on, because I feel like it takes some time for them to understand it. So again, mental models, they tend to be unconscious and below the level of awareness. So we spend a lot of time really exploring, like, why do I do that? What's the underlying belief that's causing me to do that? What's the underlying belief behind society's reason to do something? And we start with simple examples like, why do we brush our teeth? Where does that? It's like you just do it on an unconscious level, just to get them started to think about it, and think about where their thinking comes from. And then I teach the pillars of sustainability, which are environmental, economics, and social. So I just walk through some basic environmental science review and talk about what are our mental models about the environment and how we treat the environment. What are different views in different cultures? They're always really amazed that in New Zealand that the Maori were able to get the river the same rights as humans. Like that just seems not a concept that they can even relate to happening here. So we talk about why is that and how is that different than our beliefs. Economics, we talk about the economic system. What are the underlying beliefs in our system? So we go back to like the fable of the bees and the early philosophical discussions on the economic system that we have, and ask ourselves, does it make sense today? Like, given in light of what we know today, does that still make sense? And talk about our political system. And then I do this because I feel like you need to understand the parts to understand the whole, and then we tie it all together. And this is where we use modeling, we use the Iceberg and the Causal Model to do this. So this is an example of a causal model that I used. And this is like one of the projects we do in the class is a Rhino poaching project. And so we bring together economic, social, and environmental impacts all together in a model. And we talk about what's happening here. And so I find this, we don't go into like, in terms of systems dynamics, I don't have Stella or anything like that, or time to teach them Stella. So what I do is I teach them about the connections, and then they know the plus and minuses. They know how to identify different kinds of feedback loops. And then we just trace the flows and the effects of changes to the system, and just talk about it more from a conceptual time frame. I just don't have time to do more than that or to add the math to it. So just to help them get a conceptual understanding of some of the discussion of what's going on out there with this particular situation. I guess the reason I started, again, another reason, the evolution of creating the textbook with this kind of a systems perspective started too, because a lot of students, what I heard from students in passing when I first started was they just didn't understand how things connected. Like they didn't understand, like they're like, well, what is economics? Like they just couldn't put together all of the topics together. So I found that like modeling helped them do this. and kind of help them break down this, break down the silos and see how does this all work together. Because I know from my own, I have an interdisciplinary background, both undergraduate, master's, and PhD. And I know I felt that way. Like you take this economics class, you take biology class, and nobody tells you how does it all get integrated. And that was a huge frustration for me. And I didn't feel like I could effectively do that until I read Donella Meadows and discovered systems science. It would have been so much easier. And I've heard this from other people who are doing PhDs in sustainability that I've talked to. And they said too, it'd just be so much easier if they would have taught these tools early on to see the relationships. And then I found too, it reduces apathy because at least like before they're like, well, what, we're not doing anything. What can we do? These solutions aren't working. But by having tools, it can help reduce that apathy that they might feel and hopefully feel more empowered to actually do something. So again, another reason I'm doing the textbook is I've talked to instructors about incorporating this. And the barrier that I found, a lot of them agree that it's super helpful, but they just don't have the background in it. And so there's a barrier to teaching systems thinking in that they just have little time. And so in terms of the learning curve to try to integrate it into classes is just too high for a lot of them. So another hope of mine was a textbook can be used for capacity building so that more people integrate systems thinking and systems tools when teaching sustainability. Any comments? Any?
Is that your last slide?
No, I was going to talk about OER and a couple more things, but how am I on time? It can be, or
Yeah, you have 15 more minutes.
I just wanted to stop because I know I'm talking a lot.
So my thought is, as you mentioned, that your students can be freshman to senior, right? And so
Yes.
they have different levels of understanding.
Yep.
And I understand that you have different components like that, how the mental model impact your behavior and stuff like that. But have you thought, say, how their personal decision can have an impact on the environment or sustainability in general, right? So maybe some concept of the circular economy would be helpful. And then you can embed the systems thinking behind as well. So for example, you can have a cell phone and you can change it every 2 years. That's the most cellular provider or manufacturers would like you to do that so you can buy new products and give them revenues. But then from an environmental standpoint, then you have to use more metals and critical materials to make the products. And so you can talk about the impact and, the things like why we have recycling, why do we have designing for sustainability, and that there are also challenges, say, and of course, researchers are still trying to figure that out, but like why the batteries are in cell phones are so hard to recycle, or even in tablets. So because people drop their phones or tablets all the time, and the manufacturers say we should glue the batteries to the casing or the interior of the phone, so that when you drop and you pick the phone up, it's still functional. However, when it comes to recover the materials to produce the next phone, it's so difficult to do the separation and the dismantling, and it's costly. And then at that point, right, you have two choices. You can still recycle it at a very high cost, or you throw it away and buy just get new phones. And so I think that's how it's and for me it's very difficult to be sustainable from a personal lifestyle. Like it's easy to go to the grocery store and buy $5 grapes or something, but if you want to grow your organic grapes, you put in way more effort. So I think that the lack of, how does it apply to me, that makes a student could be passive, right? Because a lot of theories, but
well, we do look at we do talk about consumerism, and I actually use a cell phone example, and we do calculate embodied energy versus the embodied energy to make it and the embodied materials. And then we look at consumer use, like how does that differ? Because I do have a lot of architecture students, so that's really important for them to consider materials and design aspects at the design stage and not later. So we do incorporate they're surprised to find that they're surprised to find out like how high the embodied energy is with a cell phone, and that to recover that they would have to have they would have to like hold on to a more energy efficient phone for like 70 years, so we do talk some about that, about like, and then we talk about, well, why do we consume? Why do we need it every 2 years? What's the reason? What could be changed? What could be, changed from a design perspective? What could be changed from a social perspective? So if, like why, a lot of times you're buying them because you want the newest and somebody else has the newest. And so like I do go into that when we talk about economics and consumerism. In terms of, that would be an interesting case study on terms of the, about gluing the battery versus design for recovery. But we do touch on that. And then we also talk about other design, like if we're going to engineer stuff, why don't we look to nature? So like I have them, there's other concepts of design evolution, like biomimicry. Like that's just a whole different way of looking at design, looking to nature for answers instead of trying to control nature. And they tend to, that tends to be new for a lot of them. So like from those perspectives, I do incorporate it in class, but it would be like, I do need case studies, more case studies to present in class. So thinking about like having them trace the kind of battery thing would be helpful. If that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, I think they do, like I try to go at it, not just like a lot of times, a lot of them aren't aware of the effect of their consumerism. And we do talk about it, and does it make sense? And why are we doing it? And does it really make us happy? Because a lot of psychology research tells us it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So we do explore that kind of stuff in the class. That's like from, and then whether are the impacts, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
do you what you were talking about architecture? Do you talk about construction? Because some of them may be more familiar with construction, and things like wallboard, concrete. Those are just not recyclable. There was a guy here at Cornell who was doing. He does studies on that in this part of town where he's had his students go and examine buildings that they're tearing down and how much of it gets reused, and then they deliberately in another location tried to reuse as much as possible. And he's been trying to design modular construction techniques where they have parts of buildings that can be reused, but a lot of them are put together with glue, with adhesives, and adhesives of various sorts, and things that can't be taken apart without breaking them. So they waste a lot of construction material. But anyway, it's maybe something that could be used as an example.
No, that would actually be a great example. And I wish they would do that. We have a construction management program that's super popular, and they don't really focus on any of that stuff. So that would be a great example. I wish that they would have a course that introduces, like, my goal was this to be the right kind of jumping point where they understand some broad concepts and then can take electives in their major. But that would be a fantastic, that's so interesting that he's doing that. I wish they would do that, because we have
I think it may be on a video. I can
yeah, that'd be great.
If I get your email address somehow, I can if you put it in the chat, I can grab it, I guess, and I can look it up.
Yeah, let me see. I'll put it in the chat at the end, but yeah, we have a lot of construction management majors and I have a lot of them in my class because they take this as a minor, because they're interested in like LEED building and green building. And more, I think employers are asking for it. Okay.
So have you talked about the plastic problem in your class?
Yeah, you guys are getting to real specifics, so maybe I'll just jump. Okay, so just a sense of, okay, this is like, it's still a work in progress. So I'm going to use, so the plan is to use Pressbooks, and I'm trying to get funding so that it could be a good textbook and each chapter can be tested in the course. And I was partnering with the Water Center, or they're still willing to partner. It's just that funding opportunities change because of COVID. So it's been a little bit more challenging to find the funding. So in terms of plastic, I don't have a specific section, but that would be a subsection in here. And we do talk about microplastics, and we don't quite know what the health outcomes are of microplastics. There's some great videos from the UK on research on microplastics that I use in class, but I guess the class isn't focused. We do talk about different sustainability challenges, content wise, but my core goal is to plant that seed to do skills building, so that when they go into the next class, they start thinking about, well, why are we doing it this way? What's the beliefs behind it? Does it make sense? How is it going to structure things? What kind of patterns is it going to create? And I've seen some transference. So the provost who oversees our program mentioned that they were in a discussion about vaccines, and the student was asking questions about, like, I'm learning about systems thinking. If you're going to do that, how is it going to impact this? So they're starting to, I've seen transference of that thought process, which I thought was a huge win, because sometimes you never know if it's working. And so also I've heard from other professors where they're starting to ask more of those deeper questions, because what I find is, what I find is that generally, like, if I give them a problem, their first reaction is, we need more enforcement, rather than going deeper into asking those deeper level questions of, well, how do we get here? Like, why are people thinking this? Why is this occurring? And so I guess my goal more was skills building, because content knowledge can always come later, and they have other classes that they're going to take. I can't cover everything. Again, I cover things at a high level. So we do plastics, ocean, microplastic pollution for a day. We spend 2 weeks on climate change. I do talk about design, the importance of taking account of these things at the design stage, since I do have engineers and designers. But in terms of what I can accomplish, it is about this. So if you think about this as a systems thinking continuum, I'm not going to get here. This is like systems dynamics, and you need a lot more courses to get here. I'm trying to just get them maybe to use conceptual models to try to think more deeply about that questions. And I would love to have another class that teaches them systems dynamics, because the reality is, it being a liberal arts college, the majority aren't going to go on to graduate school. So my goal is, if I could just get them to start thinking like this, at this level, at least they can ask better questions as citizens when they go out there, in terms of, like when they're, voting or in their job, just ask deeper questions, because they tend to, the fallback that I've noticed with a lot of students, like what I'll do is I'll pre-test them and ask them, what do you think what kind of solutions do you think might work? What do you think the underlying problem is? And a lot of times with situations, we need more laws, more enforcement. And again, like, they're kind of like not thinking deeper than that. And so I guess my goal is to give them tools and give them a path to thinking more broadly, more holistically about issues, to think about unintended consequences, to think about what is the root of this, which is often thinking about our thinking, about where did it come from? Do we need to change that? Is it getting us where we want to go? So I guess I don't know if that answers your question, but I do talk about plastics, but I can't, that's more content knowledge, and having more case studies would be great. But I guess what I'm trying to do at this level with this class is skills building and then touch on the major problems. And then hopefully, and then my goal is if I can do the capacity building with my colleagues, have them integrate this in their classes. But again, there's so much capacity building that has to be done because they're not very familiar. I would say academia, higher education is still very siloed and reductionist in approach in many cases. So I guess I'm just, so my goal is more skills building and touching on major issues.
Right. The reason why I brought up plastic, because it's a problem, like it's a market failure policy for, a lot of things intertwined. And, you started your presentation saying that most of the textbook is very siloed and you want to have something more interconnected. And so I'm thinking, that the best way to, if you still believe in the tri-pillar model, right? So for the plastic case, like what is the economic fail? What is the society, society fail or something? Because I think when I look at your new TOC, it still feel like, separate matters. How do you connect the economics with the environment, with the society?
Yeah, and that's what I do in the case studies. So like I first have to, a lot of them don't come in with economic knowledge or like knowledge of how the political system works. And so we build it up, and then I actually use causal diagrams and case studies. And I have used the plastic case study. We've done that, but I just don't, I need more time to work on it. So you're right, these are the parts. And then the idea is to have the case studies that bring it together. And this, I was going to present on this, but hopefully, okay. So you can see, this is like so Rhino poaching is one of my case studies. So we can bring all together. Okay, so here's the underlying beliefs, and then here's the economic. This is high level too, because we only go over it in 2 weeks on class. But we can see like having all these different impacts. And so I try to bring together, we look at, they have multiple stakeholders where I give them information on what economists say, what wildlife advocates say. We read about what's going on with the black market. We read about consumers. We read about what's going on with the judicial system and the rangers. And then we put it all together in a diagram to model it. And so the idea is like, you got to understand the parts to be able to put together the whole. I guess that's my philosophy, because like if they don't I have to spend time on explaining how does our economic system work, because a lot of them don't have any background in economics or taken economics. How does our political system work? They're not aware of dark money and Citizens United case study, and how that changes influence in elections. So we talk about that, and like what, how, like all of these different things. And then we have to tie it all, and then I have them tie it together in a case study. So I guess but you're right. Yeah, it is very, right now, my table of contents, I'm still refining it. Right now, this is the approach I'm taking, because I guess I need them to have that background knowledge before they can move forward and do model a broader case.
Right.
So, and this is an example of them using the Iceberg model, where we modeled all the mental models of what's going on with all the different key stakeholders. Then we mapped it to the different structures, and is it increasing or decreasing poaching? And so this is what they built in class. And then then they can, they can kind of, this is just something that to help support their understanding of the situation. So we see then this quickly shows that the black market rate is where we need to decrease this or get rid of it, and then increase this if we want to solve the problems, or if we decrease this, we don't need this. And so then we can go trace back, where is this, what's supporting it, what are the stakeholders and the beliefs that are supporting the structure. So I find that is a helpful exercise, because they normally wouldn't go this deep. And then it also helps them see that the importance of really understanding what's going on with multiple stakeholders. Because when I first introduced the problem, I asked them, who would you include? And they usually just say government, and that's it. They would exclude everybody else. But then they see, oh my gosh, if I don't understand what's motivating all these people, really understand it, I'm not going to really get to a solution that might work, or that might not backfire. So,
Okay,
and
that's good.
But yeah, so you've given me, so this is some student comments. This is recently, and I was happy to see this. This was from this semester. The students said that they mainly focused on direct causes and didn't focus on secondary and indirect effects. So that this helped them see that, which I was really happy about. And then verbally, someone said, oh, I see that psychology and philosophy are important. Because usually they come in and they're like, they don't want to talk about psychology and philosophy, but then they realize how important it is to solving these problems. What are the underlying philosophical, cultural beliefs? What's the psychology of people that's, causing these actions? What social norms exist? Anyway, but you are giving me great ideas for case studies. I would love I'd love to have some extra case studies, especially since I have construction management students. That would be wonderful to have some construction examples. I know that a lot of my construction management students get frustrated that the people in the industry aren't very interested in moving on the recycling issue. I haven't really investigated it that much, but it would be really interesting to explore that with them. So yeah, I'll just leave it because we're out of time. I know this was kind of disjointed since we're going back and forth, but any thoughts? Do you think there's a need? I'm hoping that I don't create this just for my class, that it can help with capacity building elsewhere. Again, I'm working with the Water Center. I don't know, you guys, are you familiar with the Water Center for Systems Thinking? They're more K-12 oriented in teaching systems thinking and the habits of a systems thinker. And yeah, I just need anybody who's interested in collaborating on some case studies that could be used for or on any chapters or reviewing chapters would be totally welcome. So here, I'll send my email.
Sandra, you haven't talked much.
Yeah, I came in a little bit too late because I was in a class where we built actually a system dynamics model without talking about dynamics at all, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I'm so sorry. It sounded really interesting. I just wanted to add about what Richard said on this construction example, because I've worked on a project in Switzerland. I'm living in Switzerland on construction. And it was exactly like when you ask the stakeholders, they were like, that's not possible, recycling. We just don't do that. And then we dig deeper and we found out multiple reasons why it is not possible or not done, like from psychology, economic reasons, power issues, things like that. And it is now more or less implemented. So it's totally feasible to recycle construction material. It just needs some efforts. And also, so as you said, you want to make the students think about their mental models and all this stuff. So from that perspective, I find that example also really interesting.
Do you have, is that published somewhere, or like that, is that?
I can look if I find something that it's not in German. We Swiss like to publish in German.
Actually, my mom is Swiss German, so maybe she can translate for me. Yeah, she's from there. Where are you?
Zurich, but I'm
Oh, Zurich?
working in
My
Berlin.
cousins are in Zurich, yeah. Okay.
Really?
Maybe I can get some help. I think that your examples though have been incredibly helpful. Like in terms of ideas for case studies and other examples, I've been focusing on rhino poaching just because I have been developing it and testing it. And then once I feel comfortable about how to teach it, move on to other case studies to integrate in the class.
Yeah, and in your book, if you could mention design for sustainability, it would be helpful too.
The size university you're in is very different from experiences of a lot of us. My daughter also teaches at a small liberal arts college, although she's in, literature, but still, one thing I'm really impressed with is when I go to visit her, some of the people I meet, her colleagues, are very well trained. And part of it is, you have all these people graduating with degrees, but the jobs are very scarce, and a lot of them go to smaller colleges. So some of those smaller colleges have really good faculty members. It's really been amazing to me. I mean, I never really thought about it. It is like, wow, I want to work with these people. They're really good. So,
I've been,
I mean, I'm assuming where you are is the same,
I mean, I guess like I'm kind of in this weird interdisciplinary space in my university. So I'm not like in any, like I'm in the Department of University Studies. So like I'm not in like, Department of I don't have a department like Department of Engineering. I don't have a home like that, or just kind of this interdisciplinary program.
Well, sometimes that's good, but sometimes that's not good.
Yeah, it has its pros and cons. The provost that oversees the program and the dean are highly supportive. And I think partly because they have seen transference of the knowledge across, like when they seen my students, and which was heartening to hear, because sometimes you wonder if you're having any impact. But they've been encouraging me to keep moving forward, but it's sometimes.
Oh, that's good.
I think it's going to take forever, but I think what I'm going to try to do is one chapter test it and then ask for other people to test and see if it's, but maybe Ruby, are you good at design for sustainability?
No.
Oh, okay. It's gonna offer.
Well, I know some work related to that, but I think there are books on design for sustainability that you can pick out examples.
Yeah. I know some people, but I'm looking for, I need to build it slowly and then hopefully test it and see where it goes. Hopefully it will.
Well, a lot of universities are moving to that sort of program somewhere in their, curricula. I mean, here I'm in a program called Global Development, which is a strange department, and and they have a sort of sustainability type track, but it's more on a global level. And then Natural Resources here also just started a sustainability track. And so students can major in that, but it's still like in its first year or second year. So there's probably a market for all that sort of stuff at the, beginning, for beginning students, or for the, a course that's open to students from campus wide who are interested in that subject.
Yeah, we're talking about integrating systems thinking across general ed right now. And I'm not sure how that would work, like, so integrate it in more classes, because I would like to see like, because and this has been my experience, like you're just kind of left to your own devices to figure out how all these subjects connect. So I would like to see more systems thinking integrated across general ed too, so that students can make those connections. Like they often don't understand, like, okay, we're learning this concept in biology, but how is it relevant over here with how does economics affect it? And I'm hoping that there's going to be a larger transition in academia, but it's slow changing.
Yeah, the time when I was teaching the system dynamics course, the idea was to use it as it was put into a special special program, which was not the real intent of the course originally, but they were trying, it was a graduate program for PhD students, and they were from a bunch of different fields, everything from anthropology to food science to, animal science, and they were all going to be working in Africa, which most of them did. And it was on poverty alleviation and food systems and poverty alleviation. And maybe I wasn't very good at teaching it, but it didn't really work very well at the PhD level because they already had their own projects they were working on. We were supposed to use system dynamics and looking at things in terms of systems as a common language, but they were already so compartmentalized in their work, and their committees already said, no, you need to focus on your stuff, and we're trying to make them think more broadly, and there's committees saying, no, you have to define your problem and work on that and make sure you get finished. So it was sort of, some of them did do some system stuff, and some of them subsequently, after they left university, left their graduated, they didn't, some of them have become involved in system dynamics on in different ways. So it wasn't a complete failure, but I was kind of disappointed in how well it worked at that level. So I think working at the undergraduate level is much more important, although I don't think that, well, there are a lot of people who think that, even in the K through 12 people definitely think that.
I think it's important especially because so many people don't go on to graduate school, and just start to try to get them to think more broadly and make connections. Hey, if we, penalize this, there might be this unintended consequence, or just get them to start thinking in terms of too, this might, in short term, this might work good, but in the long term, there's going to be, it might have this delayed effect. But even at the undergrad level, when even the other professors that teach, they come from different fields. Like I'm the only one that's interdisciplinary, and somebody else, but only two of us that have an interdisciplinary sustainability background. Everybody else comes from like architecture or from engineering or from, even a philosophy professor teaching it. And so they teach to their strength and feel less comfortable with the systems material. So it can be hard, even they're like, because they don't want to I think a lot of professors don't like to get out of their comfort zone. And
sometimes they don't have the time either.
Yeah. That's a really important point too. Sometimes just overwhelmed in terms of time constraints.
Yeah, thanks, Marcella, for your great discussion today. I have to jump, so.
Okay. Oh, Sandra, if you could send me that information on that, even in German, it would be welcome.
Sure, I try to find that, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for all the feedback.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.